This is Big Podcast.
It's Build a Big Podcast, the marketing podcast for podcasters. David Hooper with you. This podcast, all about growing your podcast, making people care about your podcast, making money with your podcast. If that's what you're looking for, you are in the right place. If you want more from me, I've got a weekly newsletter. It's called Big Podcast Insider. That's at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This episode, all about NaPodPoMo. It is here, almost. Starting November 1st, that stands for National Podcast Post Month. It happens every November. The challenge is to produce 30 podcast episodes in 30 days. That's it. It doesn't have to be a perfect episode. Doesn't even have to be good. Showing up and finishing. That's what the goal is. You don't even have to finish. A lot of people don't. You still benefit if you finish, even better. This podcast, the one you're listening to, Build a Big Podcast, it started as part of NaPodPoMo. I called it Big Podcast Daily. I'll talk about that here in a second. It wasn't supposed to be something that I did all the time, but here we are. At the time, I had a regular podcast. It was called Red Podcast. That was a marketing podcast. I did talk about podcasting on it, but not specifically about podcasting. Originally, when I started what became the Big Podcast book, I was going to do 3 books because I'd done 3 things in my life. 3 things when it came to building an audience. I had done broadcast radio and podcasting. I had done live events, and I had written books. So I was going to do a trilogy, one on each medium, showing you how to take your message, spread it via podcasting, spread it via live events, and spread it via book publishing. You can say NaPodPoMo changed a lot for me. It changed the direction of this podcast, the books. You know, sometimes when you dive into something, you see that it works. And sometimes you see that it doesn't work. That's the great thing about NaPodPoMo. Again, the challenge, it's 30 episodes in 30 days. That is one way to use this, testing new ideas. And like this situation, this podcast, sometimes they work, sometimes they don't work. You're going to know pretty quickly, not that you're going to build a huge audience, but you're going to find out, yes, this works for me. Yes, I can keep podcasting about this topic. Maybe you don't have to go that far, though. Maybe you just want to podcast about something that you find interesting. Maybe you want to get some things on tape that you haven't taped yet. For example, stories from family members, stories from important people. Hey, we're not going to be around forever, right? This is one of the things that I wanted to do on my radio show. My radio show, Music Business Radio, I'm talking to people in the music industry. And a lot of these old guys, they're dying off, man. A lot of the young guys are dying off. I didn't want some of their knowledge dying with them. And that's one of the big drivers for me to get up and do that show every week. I bring in these dudes. We tell those stories that have not been told. Maybe you're motivated by that. Another way to use this 30-day trial, try new ways of recording, new software, for example. Maybe you want to work from bullet points rather than a script. Well, try it. Doesn't have to be perfect. Doesn't even have to be good. Try a new hosting style. Solo instead of interview format podcast, narrative style podcast, whatever you want to do. You could test a new segment. A mailbag segment, Q&A, that's an easy one. A news segment. When I started my radio show, Music Business Radio, we had a news segment. I didn't do it. It was a jock at the station where we produced. I was coming into that station. It was actually a broadcast company. They owned a few stations at the time. And I was trying to get as many people involved in this thing as I could because I wanted their ownership. So I had a news person. We had a news segment every week. We had a plan to do different scene check-ins. For example, I'm going to syndicate the show in Austin. Got a radio programmer down there in Austin. He's letting us know, hey, here's what's happening in Austin. The radio programmer in Boston, she's letting us know, hey, here's what's happening on the street in Boston. There's a lot of things that you can do with NaPodPoMo. Maybe it's producing little segments like this that can go into your existing podcast. 30 episodes, 30 segments, do whatever you want. Just do it for 30 days. And you can do this anytime, by the way. I think the thing that makes NaPodPoMo special is that everybody's doing it together. And when I say everybody, it could be dozens of people. It could be hundreds of people. It just depends on the year. They've been doing this for almost 20 years. It's great because of that community. It's nice to have people along for the ride with you because you hit maybe, 10 days, 15 days in. And you're like, what was I doing? Did I really think that I could do a podcast episode every day? Believe me, I've been there. If you're hearing me talk about it, you think, yeah, I might like to jump in. Don't worry about completing it just yet. Because like a new segment that you're testing, a new hosting style, new software, whatever you're testing for the 30 days, that's good data. You might not finish. That's fine. But you definitely won't finish. You won't have any data unless you start. You might be wondering, David, Are you going to be doing NaPodPoMo this year, attempting a fourth run at it? And the answer is no, sort of. I've got my own version of this that I'm starting up November 1st. It doesn't compete with NaPodPoMo. It's actually a newsletter for podcasters. I'll be talking about NaPodPoMo during the month. If you're interested in following along, I'm going to go ahead and give you the URL because you can sign up now. daily.bigpodcast.com. That's where I'm going to be for the month of November. I hope you'll check out NaPodPoMo at least once. Try it out. But the important thing is, get your message out, man. Do it. I'm agnostic on podcasting. People think, man, you're the podcasting guy. You must really believe in podcasting. And yeah, I do. But I've been around long enough to see the different types of ways that we can release our messages. I started in the music industry. When I started in the music industry, CDs were the big thing. Cassettes were still a big thing. Then the cassettes faded out. We just had CDs. Then we started seeing these 99-cent tracks that you could purchase, things like eMusic. They were the first guys to do it. iTunes came along from Apple. 99 cents. You buy a track, you download it, play it however you want. Then we started to see streaming services, Spotify. eMusic changed their business model. I've seen all sorts of ways to spread a message. I've seen print books. I've seen digital books. I've seen audio books. I've seen syndicated radio, streaming radio, podcasts. That's my point. Things are changing, man. We don't know where things are going to go. But what's going to be important is, like the community of NaPodPoMo, you've got people that want to get together with other people. You've got people that want to learn, be inspired, talk about things that they're interested in with each other. You can become a part of that. Podcasting is the way to do it now. If you're interested in NaPodPoMo, I've got all the links at podcast.bigpodcast.com. You can join there. You can see my daily newsletter because, like I said, I'm kind of doing it. I'm in the trenches with you, 30 days of a newsletter. Like that initial podcast that I started on NaPodPoMo, this podcast, it is all about growing your audience, spreading the message, making money with your message. The direct URL, daily.bigpodcast.com. But to find out more about NaPodPoMo, the newsletter, and everything else that I've got, podcast.bigpodcast.com. Before I head out, let me remind you about Big Podcast AMP, AMP. It stands for Audio Monetization Program. If you really want to go deep into podcasting, spreading your message, making money with your message, Big Podcast AMP, Audio Monetization Program for personal help from me. It's a lot less money than you think, and you can find out more information at bigpodcast.com/AMP, A-M-P. Thanks for listening to Build a Big Podcast. If you're subscribed, and you're subscribed, right? bigpodcast.com/subscribe. If you are subscribed, I'll see you on the next episode.